The day had started like any other in our quiet suburban neighborhood, but I could feel a tension hanging in the air, subtle and suffocating, like the calm before a storm. My wife, Emily, was tending to her flower garden, humming softly to herself, oblivious to the unease that had been creeping into our lives for weeks now. Across the street, I noticed her, Karen, our HOA neighbor, standing rigidly on her porch, arms crossed, eyes narrowing as if she could see every thought running through our heads. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She had this obsessive, almost surgical need to control everything around her, from the height of the hedges to the angle of the mailboxes. It had started with petty complaints. Emily's roses were too tall, the swing set in our yard was an eyesore, but lately her actions had grown darker, more personal. Emily sensed it too, her smile faltering whenever Karen was nearby, a shadow of worry clouding her bright eyes. I wanted to tell her not to worry, to trust that everything would be fine, but deep down I knew something was building, something that couldn't be ignored. I had always underestimated her at first, dismissing her as just another overbearing neighbor. But there was a cold intelligence behind her gaze, a precision in the way she plotted small acts of cruelty that made my skin crawl. That morning, as Emily leaned down to water the tulips, Karen's gaze followed every movement, her lips curling into a smirk that made my heart rate spike. I couldn't explain why, but a sense of impending danger clawed at my chest, a silent alarm I had learned to trust over the years. Our dog, Max, sensed it too, his ears perking up, tail stiff, growling lowly at the invisible threat across the street. I knelt beside Emily, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, trying to calm both her and myself. But my mind raced. Weeks of strange incidents, objects out of place, unnerving phone calls, shadowy figures lurking near our driveway had been building to something. I couldn't yet put my finger on it, but my instinct screamed that Karen's obsession had reached a tipping point. The air felt charged, almost electric, as if it was waiting for a spark to ignite chaos. I noticed Karen stepping off her porch now, moving slowly, deliberately, her steps echoing in the quiet morning. She carried something in her hands, small but heavy-looking, and I felt a cold, not form in my stomach. My first instinct was to tell Emily to come inside, but before I could utter a word, she looked up, smiling innocently, oblivious to the danger approaching. Just enjoying the morning sun, she said, her voice light, unaware that we were on the precipice of something unthinkable. I forced a smile back at her, trying to hide the panic I felt, while every nerve in my body screamed at me to act. As Karen came closer, the object in her hands became clearer, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't just a threatening gesture this time. She was holding a device strange and metallic, the kind of thing I had only seen in movies, something designed to cause real destruction. My heart pounded as I realized she had escalated beyond harassment or intimidation. This was a premeditated attack. The neighbors, unaware of what was about to unfold, went about their morning routines, mowing lawns, sipping coffee on porches, blissfully ignorant of the threat that had just crossed the street. Emily, still crouched among the tulips, laughed softly at Max's antics, and for a brief, heart-wrenching moment, it felt like the world hadn't changed yet. But I knew it had. Karen's eyes locked on Emily, and in that moment, the smile faded from her face, replaced by a cold, calculating fury that made my stomach twist. Time seemed to stretch, each second heavy, weighted with the potential for disaster. I could see the muscles in Karen's arms tense as she adjusted her grip on the device, and I felt an almost primal urge to move, to shield Emily from the invisible storm barreling toward us. I wanted to scream at her, to call out a warning, but the words caught in my throat. Deep down, I knew that Karen thrived on fear, on the control it gave her over others, and any sudden action might provoke her to act faster, more violently. I clenched my fists, my mind racing through scenarios, calculating probabilities, strategies, contingencies. Emily, oblivious, reached for a fallen petal, her delicate hand brushing the ground, and my chest tightened with a protective instinct I couldn't ignore. I remembered, almost with a sense of detached irony, that I had a skill, a knowledge, a secret that could change the outcome of this day. But I hadn't shared it with anyone, not even Emily. Karen's step faltered for a moment, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of her expression, a mixture of triumph and madness, the kind of look that made you realize you were dealing with someone unhinged. And in that instant, a thought struck me with a chilling clarity. She had no idea who she was really dealing with, no idea that her actions could be countered with precision, intelligence, and expertise. My fingers twitched at my sides, a familiar anticipation bubbling up inside me, the kind that only comes from knowing you have the tools to face an unimaginable threat. The air around us was thick with tension, every leaf trembling as if the world itself held its breath. Emily finally looked up, her smile fading as she noticed the intent focus in my eyes. "John, what is it?" she asked, voice trembling slightly, and I forced calm into my tone, knowing that any panic from me could make this worse. "Stay right here," I said, and the words sounded hollow even to my own ears, but I knew I had seconds, maybe less, to act. Karen took another step forward, and the device in her hands gleamed in the morning sun, an ominous promise of destruction. And then, as if the world had slowed down to a crawl, I made my decision. I wouldn't let her harm Emily. Not today. Not ever. Whatever she thought she was about to unleash, she had no idea that the quiet man she had underestimated, the one who smiled politely at HOA meetings and never raised his voice, was capable of far more than she could imagine. The storm was coming, and I was ready to meet it head on. The moment Karen released the missile, the calm of our morning shattered into chaos. The device whistled through the air with a terrifying shriek, spinning violently as it hurtled toward Emily, who had frozen mid-step, her eyes wide with disbelief. I barely had time to react, my heart hammering against my chest, adrenaline surging as I lunged forward, grabbing her and pulling her behind the thick trunk of the oak tree in our yard. The missile's trajectory was deadly precise, and I could feel the heat of its engine even from where we crouched. Sparks flew from nearby shrubs as the device struck the ground with a deafening explosion, throwing dirt and debris into the air, a plume of smoke curling toward the sky. Emily screamed, clutching my arm, her face buried in my shoulder, and I felt a surge of protective rage, unlike anything I had known before. Neighbors rushed out of their homes, their shouts and frantic calls blending into a cacophony of confusion and panic. Children screamed, dogs barked frantically, and sirens wailed in the distance, but none of it registered fully, because all I could see was Karen, standing across the street, her expression a mix of glee and unshakable madness, thinking she had won. Her lips curled into a triumphant smirk, and for a split second, I allowed myself a grim acknowledgement of how dangerous she had become. But my mind was already working, calculating the missile's speed, angle, and potential fallout. I knew I couldn't simply wait for authorities to intervene. Seconds would make the difference between life and death. I scanned the device as it skidded across the yard, smoke rising like a sinister ghost above the explosion crater. Its design wasn't standard. It was improvised but lethal, a clear reflection of Karen's cunning mind and her willingness to cross any line. Yet, even as panic threatened to paralyze me, a strange calm settled over me, the calm of someone who understood the physics, the mechanics, the exactitude required to neutralize a threat like this. Emily clung to me, trembling, whispering my name over and over, her voice a fragile thread amidst the chaos. "John, what do we do?" she asked, and I felt a pang of guilt mixed with determination. I couldn't let her see the full terror, couldn't let her know how close we had come to disaster. I whispered back, my tone steady but urgent, "Trust me, just stay down." And she did, burying her face into my chest as if the world could be held away by sheer will. Across the street, Karen raised her arms again, preparing for another strike, her eyes darting with impatience, unaware that the quiet man she thought she had cornered was already formulating a countermeasure. I edged closer to the missile, crouching low behind the oak, my hands brushing against the rough bark as I mentally mapped its trajectory. The ground trembled slightly with residual heat, and I could hear the metallic hiss of the device, cooling, a dangerous lull that was deceptive in its calm. My fingers itched to manipulate, to disarm, to redirect, but I had to move carefully. Any wrong step could trigger it. As I shifted my weight, I noticed small details that would have gone unnoticed to anyone else. The seam of the casing, the unusual wiring, the way the stabilizer fins were bent slightly off-center. These small anomalies told me everything I needed to know. I could neutralize it, but I had to be precise. One wrong calculation, one misstep, and the entire front yard, Emily, and possibly our neighbors could be destroyed in an instant. My mind raced at supersonic speed, recalling years of designing rockets, analyzing explosive physics, and improvising solutions under pressure. Karen thought she was clever, but she had no idea that I could not only predict the missile's movements, but also manipulate them with precision. I took a deep breath, focusing every ounce of energy, and whispered to Emily, "I've got this. Watch me stay low." Her hands squeezed mine, her nails digging into my skin, but she obeyed, trusting me entirely even though she had no clue the depths of my expertise. Karen launched again, this time faster, more reckless, and I could see the surprise flash across her face as I adjusted my stance, tilting my body, calculating the perfect angle to redirect its momentum. The missile screamed through the air once more, but instead of hitting Emily, it veered slightly, grazing the side of the oak tree, harmlessly embedding itself in the soft soil of the yard. I exhaled slowly, the sound loud in my own ears amidst the chaos. As Karen's eyes widened, a flicker of confusion and frustration crossing her face. She had expected fear, submission, perhaps a frantic scramble, but she didn't anticipate precision, intelligence, or the unshakable calm of someone who had faced far greater threats in her own mind. I crouched lower, moving to disarm the missile before she could launch again. My hands worked with deliberate care, rewiring, disengaging triggers, all the while keeping Emily close, her whispers of worry muffled against my chest. The world felt suspended, as if holding its breath, while Karen's frustration grew with every second. She stomped her foot, waving her arms, shouting threats that were drowned out by sirens and screaming neighbors, but the fire in her eyes never dimmed. She had crossed a line, and I knew that she would not stop, not until she believed she had won. And yet, for all her rage, she underestimated the sheer depth of skill and knowledge I possessed. Minute adjustments, rapid calculations, and careful handling allowed me to secure the device, neutralizing the immediate threat. Emily looked up at me, fear still evident but mixed with awe, realizing finally that the man she thought she knew, the one who smiled quietly at neighbors, who rarely raised his voice, was capable of protecting her in ways she couldn't have imagined. Karen, on the other hand, stood frozen for a moment, her plan unraveled, her power challenged in a way she had never experienced. But even in her shock, there was a glimmer of dangerous ingenuity. I could see it in the twitch of her lips, the narrowing of her eyes. She wasn't defeated yet, and just as I held Emily close, feeling her trembling subside slightly, I realized with a cold certainty that this was only the beginning. Karen's obsession, her madness, and her capacity for destruction had not diminished. It had only escalated. She would plan, she would plot, and she would strike again. The difference now was that I was prepared, and as the smoke cleared and neighbors began to process the magnitude of what had just occurred, I knew that the quiet suburban morning we once took for granted was gone forever. In its place, a battlefield had emerged, and I had no choice but to confront it head-on, fully aware that every second counted, every decision mattered, and every move could be a matter of life and death. The missile was only the first wave, and Karen's determination made it clear that the war had just begun. Karen's eyes blazed with fury as she realized that her first attack had failed, and in that instant, I knew she was capable of far more, far worse, than anything I had imagined. She clenched her fists, her knuckles white, and I could see the glimmer of dangerous ingenuity sparking in her gaze. The neighborhood was frozen in uneasy silence, the chaos from the first missile still lingering in the air like smoke that refused to dissipate. Emily's grip on my arm tightened, her face pale, her body trembling, and I felt a surge of protective determination unlike anything I had ever experienced. I whispered softly to her, my voice calm but urgent, stay low. Trust me, I know what I'm doing, and she nodded, eyes wide, silently pleading for me to keep her safe. Karen didn't wait this time. She lunged forward, brandishing another device, even more menacing and elaborate than the first. My heart raced, but I was no longer just a husband protecting his wife. I was a trained mind, a rocket scientist who had spent decades mastering precision, speed, and control over things far more dangerous than what Karen could imagine. Every second was crucial, every movement calculated as I assessed the device in her hands. Its weight balance and the subtle angle of its trigger mechanisms told me exactly how it would function, how it could be neutralized, and how I could redirect it without harm. Time slowed in my mind, each heartbeat synchronized with my calculations, while Emily's frightened eyes followed every motion, trusting implicitly that I would find a way. Karen's rage had made her reckless. She assumed fear would paralyze me, that her meticulous planning would guarantee her victory. But she had underestimated the quiet man who smiled politely at HOA meetings, the one who had spent countless nights designing rockets and handling explosives with surgical precision. I could see the tension in her posture, the slight tremor in her fingers, and I knew this was my moment. I moved with deliberate speed, a perfect combination of caution and decisiveness, guiding Emily behind the oak tree as I edged closer to her line of fire. My mind raced with options, contingency plans spinning out in milliseconds, and then I acted. With a fluid, practice motion, I intercepted the device mid-launch, my hands steady as I manipulated the triggers and stabilized its trajectory. Sparks flew, and the device shuddered in my grasp, but I held firm, redirecting its power safely into the yard, away from Emily and the neighbors. Karen froze, eyes wide with shock, her voice caught somewhere between a scream and a gasp, unable to comprehend how I had done it. I didn't speak. There was no time for words. Every fiber of my being was focused on neutralizing the threat, controlling the chaos, and protecting Emily. Another device appeared in Karen's hands, and this time I knew she intended to overwhelm me, to strike multiple times in quick succession. My calculations accelerated, factoring in angles, velocity, explosive force, and wind resistance all in real time. With a combination of instinct and experience, I disarmed her second attempt before it could leave her hands, letting it drop harmlessly into the grass, smoke curling from its harmlessly detonated mechanism. Emily gasped softly, relief and awe mingling in her expression, but Karen's fury only deepened. Her plans were crumbling, her control slipping, and the desperation in her eyes made her even more dangerous. She charged again, and this time I knew I had to end it decisively. Using my knowledge of propulsion, weight distribution, and reactive force, I manipulated her third device with a precision that felt almost like an art form, redirecting it, disarming it, rendering it useless without a single explosion near us. The device thudded harmlessly into the dirt, and I saw the disbelief on Karen's face turn into rage so intense it was almost tangible. You can't. This isn't possible, she shrieked, her voice breaking with frustration. But I didn't respond. Words would be wasted on someone who had already crossed every line of reason and safety. Instead, I focused on ensuring Emily's safety, shielding her as I prepared to confront Karen directly. My movements were precise, measured, and confident, the culmination of a lifetime of knowledge applied in seconds. The air was thick with tension, every neighbor holding their breath, watching the drama unfold as if it were a scene from a movie too real to believe. Karen lunged one final time, a desperate, violent attack, and I was ready. Using a combination of leverage, speed, and knowledge of the device's mechanics, I disarmed her completely, sending the weapon clattering to the ground with a metallic clang. She stumbled back, rage and disbelief etched into her face, realizing for the first time that her obsession and cruelty had met an immovable force, a mind that could counter every move she made. Emily stood trembling behind me, tears in her eyes, and I pulled her close, holding her as tightly as I could. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the emotional aftermath the terror, the adrenaline, the sense of violation, was only beginning to settle. Karen's eyes darted around, wild and calculating, looking for another way to regain control, but I could see it in her expression. She had lost, not because of brute force, but because intelligence, precision, and unwavering determination had defeated her. The neighborhood slowly began to exhale, realizing that the danger had passed, though the echoes of the missile's whistling and the chaos it caused would linger long after. Karen, humiliated and powerless, backed away, muttering threats under her breath, her fury now tempered by fear and shock. And in that moment, I allowed myself a quiet internal satisfaction, knowing that I had not only protected Emily but had done so with skill, calm, and a mastery she could never anticipate. Yet, even in that victory, I remained vigilant. Karen was unpredictable, and though the immediate threat had ended, the knowledge that someone could harbor such obsession and rage so close to home left a lingering tension. Emily's hands gripped mine tightly, her trust unspoken but complete, and I realized that in protecting her, I had not only saved her life, but strengthened the bond between us in a way that words could never capture. As the sun continued to rise over the neighborhood, casting long shadows across the yard, I surveyed the scene, the flattened flowers, the scattered debris, the shaken neighbors, and finally, the defeated but still dangerous figure of Karen. It was over for now, but one thing was clear. Intelligence, courage, and preparation had won the day, and I would never allow anyone to threaten my family without consequence. Emily leaned into me, whispering softly, I knew you'd protect me, and I held her close, feeling the weight of every second, every calculation, every risk we had faced together. The adrenaline began to ebb, leaving behind exhaustion and relief, but the knowledge that we had survived something unimaginable filled me with a quiet pride. Karen had pushed her luck too far, and in doing so had revealed her own limits. I had seen her at her worst, and I had countered with everything I had, every skill honed over decades. And as I looked into Emily's eyes, seeing the trust and love reflected there, I knew that no missile, no obsession, and no madness could ever break the bond we shared. The battle had been won. The climax of terror survived, and though the scars, both emotional and physical, would remain, the knowledge that we had faced unimaginable danger and come out stronger bound us in a way nothing else could. For all her fury and obsession, Karen had underestimated us. Underestimated what a man capable of harnessing science, logic, and courage could accomplish when his family's life was on the line. And in that knowledge, I found a sense of calm, a fragile peace amidst the chaos, ready to face whatever new challenges might come next. The aftermath of Karen's failed assault hung over the neighborhood like a thick, suffocating fog, the echoes of her madness still palpable in the air. Emily clung to me, trembling but alive, and I could feel the tension in every fiber of her body slowly giving way to relief, though her wide, tear-filled eyes reminded me that the trauma would linger far longer than the morning sun would shine. Neighbors emerged cautiously from their homes, their faces a mixture of fear, disbelief, and awe as they processed what had just occurred. Some whispered about the missile, others stared at Karen, frozen and pale, realizing fully for the first time that her obsession had crossed boundaries that could have destroyed lives. I guided Emily away from the yard, keeping her close as we surveyed the scene. Flowers flattened, soil churned, debris scattered like the remnants of a nightmare that had invaded our quiet suburban morning. Karen's face was contorted in a mixture of rage, disbelief, and humiliation. The smirk she had worn for weeks was gone, replaced by the raw, exposed reality of failure. I could see her mind working frantically, calculating how to regain control, but it was clear that she had underestimated both our resolve and the depth of my abilities. Emily's hand squeezed mine, grounding me, reminding me of what truly mattered. She had survived, and the knowledge that no device, no threat, no twisted mind could overpower us filled me with a quiet, resolute determination. Karen attempted one last gesture of defiance, raising her arms as if to strike again, but the neighbors, now fully aware of the danger she posed, stepped forward, surrounding her in a silent, watchful barrier. It was a subtle but unmistakable declaration: She no longer held power here. The police had finally arrived, sirens piercing the air, and officers quickly assessed the scene. Karen's devices were confiscated, and her threats, now documented and witnessed by an entire block, left her legally exposed in ways she hadn't anticipated. For the first time, she seemed vulnerable, her carefully constructed facade of control crumbling under the weight of reality. Emily leaned against me, still shivering but safe, and I felt the overwhelming need to reassure her that the danger was truly over. "It's done," I whispered, wrapping my arms around her tightly. "You're safe now. I promise." Her eyes met mine, searching, vulnerable, and then softened into a smile that was fragile but genuine, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and awe. The adrenaline from the confrontation still coursed through me, a sharp reminder of how close we had come to disaster. I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to feel the profound weight of surviving something so extraordinary, knowing that we had faced not only a physical threat, but an emotional one as well, and had emerged stronger, united, and unbroken. Karen, now surrounded by neighbors and law enforcement, realized that her reign of terror was over, at least for the time being. Her obsession, her delusions of control, had collided with the reality of intelligence, preparation, and courage that she could neither predict nor overpower. And in that collision, she had lost. Emily's hands trembled in mine as she whispered, "I don't know how you did it, but thank you for saving me." The raw sincerity in her voice struck me, a powerful reminder of why I had never hesitated to confront the danger head-on. I smiled faintly, pressing a kiss to her forehead, the taste of relief and love mingling in that simple gesture. "You never have to thank me," I said. "We're in this together." The neighborhood slowly began to return to a semblance of normalcy, though the morning's chaos had left an indelible mark on every resident. Conversations buzzed in hushed tones about the missile, about the courage it had taken to survive, and about the shocking realization that someone so seemingly ordinary could possess extraordinary skill and bravery. Karen's fury simmered beneath the surface, but the knowledge that she had been outmatched and exposed visibly rattled her. It was a victory not just for us, but for the entire block, a clear message that her obsessive control would no longer be tolerated. Emily and I walked slowly through the yard, surveying the damage, our hands intertwined, hearts still pounding but steadily finding rhythm again. Every broken petal, every churned piece of earth, served as a reminder of the danger we had faced and the life we had preserved. And as we stood there, taking in the aftermath, a sense of calm began to seep in, tentative but real. The terror had passed, the immediate threat neutralized, and yet the experience had strengthened a bond between us that no external force could ever sever. Emily looked up at me, her expression softening as she whispered, I knew you'd protect me." And in that moment, I realized that protection went beyond physical skill or intellect. It was the quiet promise of unwavering commitment, the silent assurance that no one could harm her without consequence. Karen, now restrained and monitored, could plot no further schemes. The neighbors watched from their porches, their eyes wary but relieved, realizing that a dangerous presence had been rendered powerless by courage, knowledge, and determination. The lesson was clear. Intelligence and preparation were as formidable as any weapon, and underestimating the wrong person could have catastrophic consequences. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long, warm rays across the neighborhood, Emily and I stood together, our fingers interlaced, hearts still carrying the echoes of fear, but also the burgeoning relief of survival. We had faced an unimaginable threat, and emerged not only alive, but united, stronger, and more aware of the fragility of the peace we often took for granted. And those scars, both visible and invisible, would remain. The certainty of our resilience offered a comfort that no amount of fear could undo. Karen's final shouts were drowned out by the hum of life returning to the block, the chaos slowly replaced by the rhythms of daily existence. Yet, the memory of her fury, her recklessness, and the danger she had posed lingered, a reminder of the thin line between normalcy and catastrophe. Emily rested her head on my shoulder, exhausted but safe, and I wrapped my arms around her, feeling the solid warmth of her presence, the undeniable proof that we had survived together. The neighbors would talk about the incident for months, perhaps years, but we knew the truth that behind the calm exterior of our lives lay a readiness, a skill, and a love so strong that it could withstand even the most insane of attacks. And as we walked back toward our home, surveying the yard littered with the remnants of chaos, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Karen had underestimated the quiet, patient man she thought she knew, and that miscalculation had saved Emily's life. We had faced fear, faced madness, and emerged victorious, and in that victory lay a profound sense of justice, resolution, and emotional closure. The day's terror had ended, and though the world would continue with its ordinary rhythm, we had experienced the extraordinary, and it had forged a bond between us that no missile, no obsession, and no neighbor could ever break. And as Emily held my hand tightly, whispering her gratitude and relief, I felt a deep, unshakable sense of peace settle over me, a quiet victory, a life preserved, and a love unbroken in the face of madness. The neighborhood had survived, we had survived, and those scars remained, both physical and emotional, the triumph of courage, skill, and love shone brighter than any shadow Karen could cast.